Welcome to Monday Motivations, 52 weeks to a more purposeful you. We are on week 22, which is honestly, it's my favorite. It's the pig story. And I'm so excited to have Scott Ostrode on the show. Scott, we met in like 2005 when I worked with your beautiful wife, Jen. And honestly, I give Jen first and you second credit to my life course change into becoming a coach, because I think you came home and told Jen, do you know anybody for that would be a good coach? And she's like, Corry. And that was what, in 2008 or 2009?
Wow. Has it been that long?
Yeah. And the rest is history. So yeah,
taking it from there.
Yep. So we've been friends a long time, and I'm excited for our viewers to hear from you on this topic. So a little bit about Scott. He grew up and raised his family in the Sacramento area. His church family is important to him as well, supporting the community and international children's missions. Scott has been a licensed realtor since 1998. In 2003, he joined Keller Williams Realty. He's been named favorite realtor by Style magazine 5 times. That's pretty cool. He's been recognized as the top realtor by the NSBIA 3 times. What does that stand for?
The North State Building Industry Association.
Okay, awesome. And is consistently ranked in the top 0.2% of Keller Williams agents worldwide. He's recently recognized as being an elite agent in the Northern California and Hawaii regions. So thank you for being on the show. It's kind of funny.
Of course, thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, you hear that intro, it's like, oh, lots of positives.
Somebody wrote that. Most of it's probably true.
All the good stuff. So what did you think about this week's message, pig story?
It was really cool. And like we were sharing, is I just got back from Orlando, and one of the conversations I was in there had to do with going out and buying property, but not having the money to do it. So the connecting the dots through what the story was with having Mr. Disney and by the way, our conference was at Epcot, was at Disneyland. So continue to connect the dots here, but Mr. Disney having the desire to go raise this pig and had to figure out a way to do it without having the financial resources to do it, but he didn't let that slow him down from his goal.
Yeah. Well, it was me. I was like, I want to raise a pig, and I didn't have the resources, and like, I'm just gonna find a way to make it happen. And and the quote at the top is, if you can dream it, you can do it. And so have you, I'm sure you have there been times in your life where you had a dream and you take that first step or you make the commitment, but you don't know how everything's going to line up?
Oh yeah. I mean, several times. Like, it's just kind of that step of faith, right? That if I feel called to go in a certain direction, I don't need to know every step to get there. But just taking that first step, take that first step, let God take that first step, help you guide that first step, and then just trust that the rest of the path will illuminate.
When was the last time that you really remember that, taking that step, like making a decision?
Well, it's before we came on too, we were talking about mission trips, and I just remember that first time doing that, which has now been, I guess maybe 7 years ago now. And I had said no for a number of years. I just kept saying, not now. It's too expensive. I'm too busy. The family's got things going on. But when the mission trip got announced, this was probably in a November timeframe. The dates for the trip were going to correlate with my 40th birthday. And I said, okay, that's my sign. Like, if I need anything else, that was it. And so, okay, you're going to finally say yes this time, and you're going to spend your 40th birthday out doing the thing that you've been putting off for the last several years.
Wow. So was it like at church, or where did you hear about the mission trip?
Yeah. So what had happened was my mom had actually been with this, had gone on this same, with the same group a couple years in the past, a couple years prior rather. And she came back, great experience. My mom at that time was probably, gosh, late 60s. Never been on a mission trip, totally out of her comfort zone. And it's like, wait, she had the faith, the courage to go do this thing. What's my excuse? And the missionary that leads that team happened to be at church that weekend, speaking up on stage, talking about an upcoming trip. And it's like, okay, I've said no for long enough. Like I just gotta do it.
Yeah.
I just gotta do it. And it was, I just haven't looked back since then, I guess.
Yeah. So how long from the time that you thought about like, oh, maybe I should go or I want to go until you actually pulled the trigger?
Well, I mean, I think a couple of years is probably on that particular example. It took a couple of years to finally say yes to the opportunity. And then once I said yes to the opportunity, then everything changed from there. My perspective on it's changed. And it's just been, had I put it off or had I not said yes at that point, I kind of think what would have happened.
What was your perspective before and what was your perspective after?
How do you mean?
Your perspective, you said you're from going on that first trip, your perspective changed. So what was your perspective? I'm sure that's probably a big question because there's probably a lot of areas.
Well, here's the deal. You go on the trip, not really knowing what to expect. You have kind of outline of knowing what you're going to do, but you don't really know until you go what it's going to be like. And I came out of that trip ready for the next one. And in fact, the leader for that trip was at a point of kind of retiring from leading these groups. And so she said, okay, Scott, we're going to pass the battalion to you, pass the baton to you rather. And so subsequently in the years going forward now, I've had the pleasure of building the teams to get down there with help, with co-leaders and whatnot, but I've been putting together the teams to go down there each year. And who would have thought after going on one trip that it would lead to all these other ones going forward.
Wow. And how many years have you been doing this?
So I just turned 47. So
I was indirectly asking how old you were.
Yeah, exactly. No, I just turned 47 at the start of this month. So it's been 7 years and getting ready to take a group down there this summer. So I guess that's either trip. I guess it must be trip 7 then. Yeah. So trip 7.
So you go once a year.
Yeah. And the cool thing with this is that, so my mom was the inspiration to get me to say yes. And then, my daughter, Caston, she has a passion for kids and for ministry, but specifically around medicine. And so she actually joined me. So this will be her 4th or 5th year going with me. So my mom started this legacy, planted the seed, then they got me to say yes, that now got Caston to say yes. And actually Peyton joined us down there. My son joined us down there a couple of years ago too, on a separate kind of trip that overlapped with ours. They went down to do some coffee ministry, but the legacy continues.
Okay. So I'm getting inspired on there's all these little messages in this message. One is just how much our lives matter. Like how you said your mom inspired you, just how many of us, when we're playing small and we're not taking risks and we're not taking that step of faith, it's not even so much about how is it limiting our lives, but it's also how many lives around us could we be building when we take that step.
That's right. And you never know that impact. The doctor that started this organization is a surgeon from the East Coast named Dr. Jeff Rice. And he always likens it to dropping a pebble in a pond, that if you put the pebble in the pond and the ripples go out, and you don't know exactly where those ripples go, but just having that first person to throw that rock or throw that pebble into the pond, then the impact that has just goes out and goes out and goes out and goes out. And we'll not know exactly who was touched. I mean, when we're there to see the eyes light up and the care being given and bringing people to Christ, we see some of that in the moment, a little bit, But the true kingdom impact, we won't know till we get to the other side. And it's pretty exciting.
Mm. I'm taking a class right now on the problem of suffering and evil. And we had a really big discussion yesterday about injustice and just, and it ended up being like really big topics, you know. We even dabbled in like socialism and capitalism for like 5 minutes, maybe more like 2. But how has going on these mission trips influenced your perspective, you know, living in the wealthiest country in the world, and then California, Northern California, I mean, El Dorado County, like how has it changed you? I'm curious because I've never been on a mission trip.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you asked that question, because you know we go, or the first time going down there, it's like, you know, I'm going to do all these great things. I'm going to make this huge impact. And the reality is, once you say yes and you go on something like this, yeah, you do make an impact there locally, but it's the impact really it makes on you. And you use that word perspective earlier. It's the perspective you bring back that, you know, we're blessed to live where we are. I wouldn't trade where I had the opportunity to raise our family. There's no two ways around it. And El Dorado Hills is the bubble. It's, you know, you get outside of our little town here, even getting into Sacramento, and, you know, but let alone anywhere else in the world, it makes you really take pause on what we have, the opportunities we've been given. But to put it through the eyes of the local people there, you've never seen joy on faces the way you do in a third world country. The smiles, the laughter, the welcoming, the inviting, all of that, like they just have such joy. They don't, it's almost like they don't know what they don't have. And because they don't have all the distractions of the Western world, they get to focus on things that are much more important.
I saw Bob Goff has a new book out, Undistracted. I think it gets released like March 11th or 12th, but how, like, I'm really curious what it's like for you to go there, you know, see all this, and then when you come back, how quickly do you find yourself like forgetting the differences? Or I'm curious, what's that experience like?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So before I answer that though, so typically on these trips, we read a book, we read some sort of devotional type book that kind of bonds the trip. On that very first trip, we read Love Does.
Oh, so good.
Just tying it back to Mr. Goff, but yeah, so I've learned, and I actually I talk with the team before we leave, and just before we go on the trip, and then just before our return back to the States, it's to say, you all just had an amazing experience. You saw things, you were touched by things. Your spouse wasn't there. Your kids weren't there with you. Your coworkers weren't there with you. Your friends weren't there with you. And you can't hold them responsible for that. You're coming back a changed person maybe, but the people that were still back in El Dorado Hills, they kept living their life the same way. And so you really do have to bring back some grace on that, and not be like, oh, I remember Cassie saying after one of the trips, she got back and one of her girlfriends, who was probably a freshman in high school at the time or something, was complaining because she didn't get like the latest iPhone, right? Something like that. And Cassie's like, you don't understand, because I just did these things where people they just want medicine, they just want food, and you're worried about getting the new iPhone. But she held back from that conversation. Those are the thoughts in her head, but she didn't express them because she knew it's like, okay, it's just different. Like that person didn't happen to have that experience. And then human nature creeps in, and you know, you come back all gung ho, and then you slide, and then you slide a little bit more, and you slide a little bit more, which I think is the importance of going back every year, or serving in some capacity on a consistent basis, so you can kind of bring yourself back to that time.
When are you guys going again?
We leave the last week in June, so June 24th to July 2nd this year.
Okay.
We still have a couple spots left, Corey.
We don't know. We never know. Maybe it's, I don't know. I got 2 years. It took you 2 years. No.
I'll remember that. I'll
Oh,
remember that.
well, you can bug me. Who do you know that might be interested on going on a mission trip?
That's right.
There's one
Maybe
spot.
maybe somebody in your audience will hear this today and it'll
Yeah.
spark something for them. And by the way, like I'll say this is missions aren't for everybody. Let
No.
me say that differently. An international mission isn't for everybody,
Mhm.
right? There's opportunities to serve in your backyard. There's opportunities just to serve literally next door, going and just being a neighbor, knock on a neighbor's door and see what their needs are. So it's not for everybody, but I do think we all are called to serve in some capacity.
Mhm.
And if that's your spiritual gift to go on a journey like this, by all means go after it. Don't deny it.
Mhm.
But we're all made to serve. And so where is it that you can serve?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So, so we kind of started dabbling in the, okay, you go there, your perspective changes, and then you come back home. Like, what's it, how long? Well, I'm assuming eventually you sort of kind of forget the perspective. Is there like about like, what would you say is the average time frame before you're back in the Western perspective?
Yeah. Yeah, I would. That's a great question. I had to kind of think about that for a second, but probably in that kind of 4 to 5 month period. So I'll tell you. So traditionally, or in the past, I would go with teams in February, and this year, as like last, we went in June. So one of our groups just got back. They were there. In fact, they just got back 2 days ago. And so I'm seeing their pictures, I'm seeing what they're doing, and I'm jealous, right? Like, I wish I was there now. So I do have those little sparks that bring me back
Mhm.
because you see the photos. And then over time too, we've made relationships with people in country. And so even throughout the year, and this is one of the benefits of technology and whatnot, is that we can stay in touch electronically, instant message and WhatsApp and whatnot, just so we can communicate back and forth, check in on each other, how's things going in the family, how's things going in town, what their needs are. So the connection has grown over time with that. So that kind of keeps me in touch throughout the year. But there's just no substitute from being face to face, belly to belly with people.
Mhm. Yeah, so kind of going back to the ripple effect and there's always something we can do. What do you think are some simple things we can do on a daily basis to stay, keep a perspective of the diversity in this world,
So
if there is such a thing?
yeah. No, I like I was sharing, we just got back from our national conference in Orlando, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with an author by the name of Sean. It's not Anchor, it's Sean
Oh
Corry.
yeah, Sean Archer, The Happiness Advantage.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, he was the keynote speaker.
Oh my gosh, does it talk like super fast?
What's no, well, maybe. I mean, no, average speed. But what he was talking about, so talking about the happiness part of it, he was talking about just the positive people go further in life. Being optimistic, the optimists are more successful. And it got to this point about doing gratitude. And he challenged all of us to, on a daily basis, write down 3 things that we were grateful for in the last 24 hours.
Mm.
So, that thing about doing it in the last 24 hours, it was what stood out to me, because I get in these patterns, or I had many patterns in the past, right? I have my journal out in the morning and I'm writing gratitude. God, thank you for my breath. Thank you for this house. Thank you for my wife. Thank you for my kids. Thank you for my health. And all those things are important. But said every time, they don't have the same impact on the brain as really searching back to, what am I grateful for? What happened in my life in the last 24 hours that I can be grateful for?
Mm-hmm.
So that each time you're having to come up with, each day having to come up with something new to write down gratitude towards.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second challenge with it was, on a daily basis, sending out either an email or a text, or being so bold as have a phone call and expressing gratitude to somebody. And building the habit of doing that. He said, if you were to do do the journaling daily for 3 weeks and do the text message or the phone call, email for 3 weeks, what would happen?
That makes me think of, so I do a lot of work in large organizations where it's employee engagement is an issue or a need. And so one of the things, a friend of mine who does the same work, she just sent me a little Instagram reel, and it was about since the pandemic and everybody, working from Zoom at home. The idea is you ask your employees, what's one thing you did today, or what's one thing you did this week that made a difference for our company? Because right, because it's like when we're out of sight, out of mind, it's hard, even on your teams at the office, KW Roseville, right? It's like there's, the number one reason people leave organizations is that they don't feel appreciated. But sometimes it's hard to appreciate in this current climate of not being in person as much. And so when you said that about Sean Archer, I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of another way to do it.
Well, and what he shared too was a lot of people have enthusiasm and do it day 1, day 2, day 3. He said the turning point is day 8, because we all probably have 3 or 4 people we can reach out to and feel comfortable with. The ones that are top of mind, the kids, the parents, your spouse, your best friend, some of your coworkers. But you get to day 8 and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I ran out of who else is there? Yeah. And you got to start searching out, like, okay, well, maybe it was my college roommate or my best friend from high school, or who knows? But the challenge. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So that flip is that if you can get past day 8, your brain really has to start thinking about who else out there in the world could you do it to.
Yeah. Oh man, this has been so awesome. We've kind of incorporated a lot of different things. We started with just going for it. We don't have to know what are all the resources, but if we just go for something, kind of like in the pig story, and you're positive and you're resourceful, the solutions will come. I'm sure there's lots of stories of people on your mission trips that they're like, I don't know how I'm going to get off work, or I don't know how I'm going to, and then it's just like, you just take it one step at a time. And then we kind of talked about, you matter, how your mom has sparked all this change in so many people's lives. I mean, 7 years later, here you're still going.
Yeah.
And so, as we start to close down this conversation, what's kind of on your heart? I always ask people, our guests, one last question of like, what advice would you give to yourself or others? So I'm going to kind of rephrase it of what do you feel on your heart would be the core message that you would want people to remember from our discussion today?
I would just say, when you feel called in a certain direction, don't be afraid to say yes. And sometimes that can be confusing, because you could maybe hear some mixed messages in your head, or just how our brains are wired sometimes. But if you feel like you're being called in a certain direction, occupationally, relationally, whatever it happens to be, take a step. Take a step in that direction and see where God meets you with that. And then you get to that spot and then look for another opportunity. What is there another step here? Sometimes the idea is it's okay to be still. You don't always have to be moving forward. There's times of rest. There's times of being content in the space you're in. But if you feel that you're drawn in some direction, put yourself out there, take a step of faith, and then see what steps follow from there.
I love it. Yep, because we never know if we're just going to be sitting in our comfort zone, playing it safe. So
growth happens when you're uncomfortable, Corry.
That's right. And it all started with you telling me about coaching. Now look, almost, I think 13 years later.
I'm still waiting for my residual check, but maybe you have the wrong address. Maybe
royalties from the book, maybe. I don't know.
There you go.
Okay, so let's see, what else do we have? So People can find you at, well, you have a lot of hilarious social media stuff about real estate. And I think people should just be your friend on Facebook because you really have funny, engaging posts. I'm always responding to them. And Scott has a ton of humor. So if you want to laugh, definitely follow him on Facebook. But then do you have like a website, or people can reach you at your email? I think that's what you want.
Yeah, any of the above is fine. The email is just my name. It's Scott@teamostrode.com. And the website's the same, just teamostrode.com. And yeah, we have fun on Facebook. We're not afraid to make fun of ourselves. Just kind of put ourselves out there and just kind of be authentic in that way. If you can't laugh at yourself, then you're not doing things right.
So true. And then what about if anybody's interested in learning more about your mission trips?
Yeah, absolutely. Just send me an email. Like I said, the foundation that we support is called Rice Foundation.
Okay.
Their website is just ricefoundation.us. You can find out more about who they are there, or if you just want a personal testimony about what they do, I'm happy to share that with you.
Awesome. Well, we didn't plan on it being about mission trips, but that's the direction it was supposed to go. So
I guess so.
Yeah. So, okay, everyone, thank you so much. And next week, week 26, we're going to have, the topic will be prevail. So if anybody needs some inspiration on resilience and overcoming, you definitely want to come back. So have a great week.
Thanks, Corry. See you.